Hello, hello, my beloved waking gods and goddesses. Maria West here. Welcome to Love, Truth, and Beauty. This is episode 412 and my 23rd installment of my series, Conversations with Women. And today I have the amazing astrologist, wisdom woman, Caroline Lindon. Caroline, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited. I love your Substack. I love your Facebook posts. You have a very down to earth, very direct yet very feminine, soft approach to really expounding on astrological terms, issues. And so I wanted to share you with my audience because I think they would really benefit from your approach. So my first question to you is, how did you come upon deciding on astrology to have a nice focus upon?
Yeah, absolutely. So, since I was a little girl, I've always been a really observant person, very introverted, and I think probably comes from being like an only child. So, spending a lot of time on my own, so you kind of go a bit inward and you become a bit strange. Um, and I'm also I'm dyslexic and I'm ADHD. So what I always find with people who are neurodiverse is that they usually have a special interest.
Yes, yes, indeed.
and and for me, it was always people and why they do the things they do. So I spent all this time when I was younger just watching everything going on around me. And then, so doing any kind of personality test, I love all of that, just trying to figure out why things are the way that they are. So anything that I do in a training, it's all directed towards that why do people do the things they do question. And anything that
Cool.
can expand that for me is kind of where my interests lie.
Wow, 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 wow. So, did you actually seek out having a reading with someone, or was it more delving into, say, books and that sort of thing, or a combination perhaps?
I think for me, being dyslexic, books are kind of like this closed source of knowledge for me. So I have to look elsewhere. And to be honest, a lot of the looking comes from inside me. So I just spend a lot of time contemplating and just thinking about small things and just sitting there with it for a long
Yes,
time
yes,
to get my thoughts clear on what that is and what that means.
yes.
Yeah.
That is cool because ultimately the information is actually inside if
Yeah.
we sit and listen, and being
Yeah.
neurodiverse myself, I
Uh-huh.
understand. I
Yeah.
understand, the contemplation of really tuning in. And were there particular people in your life that sort of perplex you in their behavior that were sort of inspirational components for
Yeah.
you?
So family life. So I know you know a bit about astrology. So on my IC, so that's where your family is and your roots
Yes.
are, and even some might say your past life or your past. And so for me, my IC is conjunct Chiron, so a wound.
Oh,
So that's a huge wound for me. And it's also conjunct the notorious fixed star Algol.
okay.
So yeah, so home life was kind of difficult, to the point now where I don't really have any communication with anyone I'm related to at all. So yeah, so watching a dysfunctional family growing up, you learn so much from that, from those situations.
And did you find that it helped you in not just understanding them, but also helped you in terms of your own sort of connections to them? Like, do you think that knowledge deepened your relationships with them or as perhaps softened, tempered your relationships with them?
I think that I spent a lot of time when I was younger walking on eggshells, as a lot of people
Mm,
do who are in those situations, and you
yes.
just learn how to navigate it. And you get to the point in your life, it's like, well, I don't want to navigate that anymore. You know, I want something more for myself. And then you've got to try and figure out who you are, because you've spent your whole life like being someone to compensate
Yes.
for someone else. So
Yes.
you've got to spend that time just trying to figure out who you are, what you are, where you want to go, what you want to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. What was that process like for you? Like, did you
Um,
remove yourself from situations or limit your time with particular people? Or cut
well,
them off, perhaps?
yeah, I had to. I didn't have a choice. So
Yes.
I always knew that if I stayed in my hometown, it wasn't a good place for me. But I decided to stay for the sake of I had a daughter quite young. So I
Yes.
stayed where I should have maybe moved on, and I didn't. And then it got to the point where I didn't have a choice.
Yes.
And a lot of this stuff happened actually at the beginning of Neptune and Pisces, which is, I'm thinking a lot about that. It's had a huge impact on my life. So that was about, 2011, things kind of started. And things got really difficult for a long time. Lots of things happened, and there was no chance to recover. It was just thing on top of thing.
Yes.
And so the very last thing was being taken to court by my own mother.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was then, and then at that point I was like, I can't do this anymore, and I had to move, and we moved nearly 200 miles away, and everything stopped. All the drama, all the crazy, it just stopped. It was like it broke that generational curse, which was
Wow.
really
Good
amazing.
for you. Good for you. And these are necessary, drastic moves because we learn through contrasting experiences, and
Mhm.
when families, I know I can relate to that because I was the one that was trying to like keep everybody together. Can we just all get along? I would try to like write out agreements and send it via mail or by email that, okay, we're going to get together for Easter. Can we each agree and sign it? Never worked. It just didn't work. It would just
Yeah.
erupt into some really horrific shit show. So
Mhm.
I understand that. And then having your own mother take you to court, I can't imagine what that was about
Yeah.
and
Well,
what
that was
that
the
was like.
second course, the second court case, because I had Pluto in the 12th house as well. It was, and I didn't know astrology at this time. So
Wow.
yeah, so I was arrested, and it was bad. Things were pretty
Holy
bad.
moly. Yeah, I can imagine. Now I can
Mhm.
imagine because the tribal lineages, that schism can
Mhm.
be just so overwhelmingly intense and toxic.
Yeah.
And I used to be under the notion that you have to keep blood relations, like you have to keep them intact, that you
Mhm.
can't have no contact ever again. And I've had no contact ever again for the last 11 years. And I gotta say, my life, it blew up for a while, but then
Mhm.
it improved
Yeah.
so immensely, you
Yeah.
know, and that's so good that we get pushed beyond our
Yeah.
limit, and that's it. It's like no more.
Yeah, and your intuition's telling you for a while, but you're not listening. You're not hearing that your
Yes,
gut saying get out of here, and you're going, no, but it'll be fine. But
if
and
only.
we actually done that at a similar time. So I haven't spoken to my family in about 11 years now. So yeah,
Yeah,
so that's
yeah,
about the exact same time. And you get to the point, it's like there's other people who are enabling the negative behaviors, and stirring the pot, and you're like, I can't deal with you either. And
yeah,
they're
yeah.
not bad
So
people,
you've
but you just
noticed that
can't.
as well.
Yeah. Mhm.
That
I
there
had to cut myself off for years, so I just kind of went into my little cave. It's the only way I can describe it. I gave up work, I gave up a really successful business, and I just disappeared into my cave for a few
Yeah.
years before I was ready to kind of re-emerge again.
Indeed. I moved initially to another state and then moved to Europe for 4 or 5 years just before,
Wow.
and came back to America just before. In order to be able to do that,
Mhm.
because the ties were so strong, and of
Yeah.
course, when you start looking at your astrocartography lines and you start seeing where they get laid out, and you're going, holy oh, what was I thinking? And that was the whole thing for me, is the extension of my astrological stuff to astrocartography, and I actually trained with the originator, I think Jim Lewis, I think that's his name.
Okay.
And, and like you just forget because it's so long ago,
Yeah.
the late 70s, early 80s, where you think you're going to remember. And it's like a skill or a tool that you just bypass because you're so in the throes of trying to keep things in balance with your tribe, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so good for
Absolutely.
you. So you basically started all over.
Yep, absolutely. Completely new place. I was with my partner though, so I wasn't completely alone. And we had two young children at the time. But what I was also able to do, learning astrology. In Scotland, we're really lucky here because they record the birth times on our birth charts. So I
Oh,
was
wow.
able, so I was able to go way back to like the 1800s, and look at like my ancestors' birth charts, and compare them to my own and see where they were and what was going on.
Oh
And so
my
even like
God.
I mentioned my mother, so I obviously looked at her birth chart, although I'm having a trouble finding her time of birth, which is very strange. But anyway, so what I can compare, we're absolutely here to challenge each other and for growth. It's an opportunity for growth. So once you can get to that point, you can see that, you can go, okay, I was supposed to experience that, and
Wow.
then you can move forward with it. Well, it helps me to move forward with it.
That is amazing. That's amazing. So your website,
Uh-huh.
Saturn Seminary, I just love that name. So, before we hit record, I was telling you about my 19-year Saturn cycle, in
Mm-hmm.
Vedic astrology that began uh, at age. I was 40 when that started.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, or no, 41.
Mm-hmm.
And it went for 19 years. So it went up until I was 60. I turned 60 in 2019, and then it was over with. And then, of course, 2020, we go into the sort of COVID, the
Mm-hmm.
COVID era, up to now. So I understand that relationship with Saturn. I've had to become friendly with Saturn because I was not having fun. And I know my Vedic astrologer was telling me, I'm a bearer of bad news here because this is 19 years, a
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed shit show
Yeah.
everywhere you look, but it's going to be rich if you
Mm-hmm.
can keep the mindset that these experiences are going to be rich.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember listening to him, and he's Indian, and I'm thinking, I'm not liking this at all. Really, really not
Mm-hmm.
liking this. But what was interesting about it is comparing Vedic astrology to the Western astrology and really seeing the growth spurts all the way around my chart. Like each house, there was intense lessons to be learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so how did you come up with that name? Is it just, I want to hear the story because I'm
Okay.
fascinated with the name.
um, so I felt a connection to Saturn for a long time. Um, and so I'm born with Capricorn rising. I also have the moon in Aquarius.
Yay, me
Both.
too, Capricorn rising. Yeah, in Western.
Yeah. And so Saturn's always just, especially when I started learning astrology, it just became so strong for me. And I remember I started wanting to work with energies, we'll put it that way.
Mhm.
And I started off working with Frey and Freya. And from Frey
Ah,
and Freya, I ended up at Saturn, and I just found that all paths lead to Saturn. No matter where I looked, it was all leading back to there. So I kind of made that commitment that I wanted to do that. And part of the name was to kind of dedicate the work that I'm doing to Saturn, and also like seminary part of it. So I kind of asked, "What do you want this to be called?" And that was what So seminary is this like old word that doesn't seem to get used much anymore. It's been kind of hijacked by Christianity, and they
Indeed.
use it in their like places of learning. But originally it's very old, and actually goes back to the word semen. So they came from the same places. But for me, it's about it was always used as like a seed nursery, so a
Yes.
place to plant seeds and nurture them
Indeed.
so that
I
they can
think that's
grow.
brilliant. Just the brilliant connection to it, because like I said, I'm very, very friendly with Saturn. And it's just so fascinating to me because I do have Saturn in Capricorn in the 12th house, you know. So it's just fun. It's
Yeah.
fun time. And I know so during that phase or that Saturn cycle, 19 years,
Mhm.
um, I did a lot of work with the tarot and the archetypes. And
Mhm.
what kept coming up along with Saturn was the Tower card. Constantly. They
Yeah.
came hand in hand, you
Mhm.
know, and then every now and again, the Emperor would show up,
Mhm.
which I always felt comforted by. Um, so it was an interesting process because I was every time I heard Saturn, I would just hear the first thing that would come into my mind was shitstorm. All the systems, the structures of government, of,
Mhm.
mind control, all of the systems of control. And I realized that perspective of mine was indeed kind of mind controlish
Yeah.
over my because when we have this notion of being fearful of something without
Mhm.
actually examining what is behind your fear, I
Mhm.
was blowing up Saturn, and then I was realizing, I really have to face it. I got 19 years to face this.
Mhm.
So I was very conscious of my journey
Yeah.
with Saturn. And
Uh-huh.
so I really appreciate you really honoring Saturn,
Mhm.
and Saturn has all kinds of father time structures, all
Yeah.
of that. And it can be oppressive, but it can also, I think, when you learn about oppression and your perceived oppressions based on your limited mindsets, that
Mhm.
when you face that Saturn archetype within yourself, you can actually break the bonds
Yeah.
of feeling oppressed, feeling enslaved, feeling put upon.
Yeah.
Um, has that been your
Absolutely.
experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're saying about us having the wrong impression of Saturn, we absolutely do. We've kind of we've done it with all of astrology, and I have a lot of respect for modern astrology, a lot of it, and I would never call myself like a Hellenistic astrologer because I'm not that either.
Mhm.
There's good points in both of them, absolutely. But I think that we've been misled and we've been led away from Saturn. And it's weird when you listen to the mythology; it's always Saturn went away, or he was overthrown by his son. It's that kind of mythology, get the Saturn. But the biggest point for me is I think we look at astrology wrong. And I think that we actually need to start with the planets. So if we take the planets, and we spend a lot of time in the signs, but we actually should be looking at the planets first.
Indeed.
And so each of the planets actually has a male and a female side. And a lot of the time we're kind of shown that backwards, but I think it makes more sense if we think about it as their expressions. So there's a
Mhm.
masculine and a feminine expression of each of the planets. So for Saturn, the masculine expression is Aquarius, and the feminine expression is Capricorn. And we always hear father time. We always talk about father when we think of Saturn, but we forget the feminine side of Saturn,
Yes, yes,
which is Capricorn, which is the hag. It's this the old woman. It's her ancestors.
yes.
Really, it's her
Oh,
oldest
wow.
ancestors. But this is where I come from with astrology,
That is a
and it kind of
beautiful
changes.
way.
It's a different way of framing it, and I think it actually changes we actually look at Saturn and look
Yes.
at those planets. Yeah.
Wow. So I just had this thought come up as you were speaking about the feminine way of Capricorn
Mm-hmm.
and our lineage, because we were talking about family
Yeah.
and how during that time of the Saturn cycle, family was like in my face
Mm-hmm.
as I endeavored to position myself as a sort of matriarch,
Mm-hmm.
because my mother was so insane.
Yeah.
And my family, my extended family, because of their fear of her,
Mm-hmm.
would secretly, behind her back, endeavor to, solicit my help or whatever. But then it
Mm-hmm.
always backfired because I think in their endeavors to sort of align with me, their the mind control of my mother's control over them
Mm-hmm.
would win in the long run, and it was extremely frustrating. And to I'm wondering what your opinion is, because my conclusion is that Saturn as the feminine, or not Saturn, but Capricorn as the feminine aspect of
Mm-hmm.
Saturn also shows us the futility of endeavoring to remain in toxic situations.
Yeah.
And quite often the feminine way is to just, well, I mean, this is part of the martyrdom aspect of the feminine way, is to just take shit and,
Mm-hmm.
and sit there. And so one of the lessons that I learned during that is no,
Yeah.
no, this is not healthy. This is actually very toxic. It's
Mm-hmm.
very it's depleting. And one of the things that happens to the feminine when she is not in the receptive principle, but giving of herself so much, is that
Mm-hmm.
she gets exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so you mentioned matriarch, and that's what Saturn is. It's the matriarch and patriarch. Old school, proper old school, the village
Yes.
elders, think of them like the village elders. The midwives in the community, they're the people who hold all those skills and they teach others, and we've just forgotten that. We've had this twisted view of what they are. I don't know. I mean, is it something to do with in our society we put youth and beauty on a pedestal, and we don't want to think about old people, and
Indeed. Indeed. And I'm kind of in that space
Mhm,
because I notice there is a dismissive quality once you reach a certain age.
mhm,
And, for me, I'm closer to 70 than anything. And it's like the focus on women,
mhm.
youth, sexuality, that over the top, whatever it is, that seems to take precedence over the wisdom of a life well
Mhm.
lived
Yeah.
for, say, a woman of a certain age, like
Mhm.
over 40.
Mhm.
There's a dismissive quality that gets really put upon women. So I
Yeah,
really appreciate that, because we do need to return to the old ways, return
absolutely.
to the old ways of respecting the wisdom of our elders. And we don't have that in this society. We
No.
we stick people in homes,
Yeah.
you know. I'm at that age where I'm planning the end, so to speak. And it's the end where I'm vigorous enough to not stress out about that. But I know
Mhm.
people my age that are just like, it's doom.
Yeah.
It's complete doom, because they've reached a certain age and it is over.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're bringing in all the assisted dying and things just now when people are feeling that way. So they've been kind of indoctrinated to feel that way. And but we'll sort that out for you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little disconcerting for me, because I don't subscribe to that. And I mean, part of what I like to do is I like to share the different perspectives just so people can feel inspired again,
Yeah.
and I think that's important. And I think when we look to the wisdom of our elders, there's more than inspiration there. It's sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. So even although my own family was a shit show, I had a good place to model. So my partner's family they're very old school. Like you see pictures on social media about old school families, and they'll be having their dinner on their knees, and there's just a room full of people. That's what his family's like. So I was so lucky to be involved in that, and they just accepted me. And his gran was the absolute old school matriarch of the family, always
So
baking
beautiful.
and cooking and knitting, and so yeah, I was really blessed to have that. And I
Yeah.
think a few years ago, I kind of came to the point where it's like my long-term goal is to be that gran that has their family around them, and that's another aim. The door always has to be unlocked because people are always coming in and out to visit me. The thing I do not want to happen is to end up in a home and oh, we'd better go and see gran. Oh
Exactly.
no.
Oh, it's so, I used to play music and go into various homes, so if these homes had a piano, and I would bring my guitar, and a lot of these people were just so forgotten, and it just made me just so sad that this was somebody's mother and
Yeah,
father.
yeah.
Like, what's going on? I mean, are we that distracted in modern society that we can't take care of our own? And I know that for me, when I was in that process 11 years ago of really examining my choices, because the dynamic was so disrespectful and so toxic. When your mother has no qualms about telling you to fuck off and die, for real, like to my face, without any hesitation, and thinking to myself, this is like a bad boyfriend. Like, would I stay with a bad boyfriend who was talking to me? Like, of course not. Of course not. And then I fast forwarded, and it's like, who's going to take care of her? I, you know, I'm not, and I really needed to work that one out, and realize, well, she's got a bunch of fearful people surrounding her that are going to take up that torch. And I had to really be in that place of acceptance. So I did a lot of work around that and
Yeah.
just accepted it and put myself first. It's like, yeah, it was either me or her, and the choice was made. And I
Yeah.
don't regret that choice. But I hear you, because you were talking about respecting elders, and I'm like, well, okay. Uh,
Yeah, no, I absolutely get exactly what you're saying. And I went through that same thought process myself, and I was like, and the funny thing is that my own mother made a point of not having a funeral for her own father. So it's like, what goes around comes around.
whoa,
So
whoa.
that's the way it is. So for me, it's about starting again and having my own family,
Mhm.
and yeah. So and I remember even when I met my partner, that was a big thing for me, is having someone who did have that big family.
Yes.
It may be mega functional, but just that the old school family where your cousins are your best friends, that kind of family.
Yes, yes. I totally love that. I think that is just such a wonderful model to have, and to have it actually materialize within an entire family system. That's amazing to me. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I think we're all going to be asked to kind of face that. I think with like the cost of living crisis, all these words that people are using, but I think we are going to be forced, and I think it's going to be a good thing to think about intergenerational living more than what we have been before. And I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I think some people will panic with that. Maybe the old folks home won't be an option anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, there's going to have to be, we're going to have to like face some things together, you know. And I know with my father's side of the family, um, very nomadic, combination of Finnish, Russian, Chinese, Mongolian. And so,
Wow.
they're very clan-ish. So compared to my mother's side of the family, you know, which is Spain, Spanish, Philippines. You know, there's clans there, but there was this hierarchical kind of the sort of peasant class versus the conquistador class really disturbed me. Like I just felt very, very strange about it. But then spending time with my extended family on my father's side, there was a certain level of respect for nature. You know, they're not religious, they're more pagans, really respecting the land, living, respecting the seasons and all that kind of stuff. So I related more to that and just the innate sharing of responsibility for the daily needs. You know, everyone is like very, very close knit, and of course, the terrain is rough. You know, it's cold most of the time. You know, and so pooling resources and really keeping track of one another because they're not really in metropolitans, and the ones that are, you know, only go there for a certain amount of time, and then discover, oh, it's not for me, you know. Ulaanbaatar in Mongolia is not exactly a nice metropolitan, you know. I mean, it's where a lot of people sort of hang out because there's more opportunity there for work. But for the most part, I feel blessed that some of that my family have just decided no, that is not for us. You know,
Yeah.
we're gonna do other things our way. So it's like some of the old ways are being preserved.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do you think we're gonna get there in terms of returning to the old ways? Because I know I've spent a lot of time in Scotland and the UK, and I could live in Scotland easy. And it's really too bad we did not connect before my trip with my Scotsman to Scotland in October, because we could have really, you know, had a good time connecting. Because you're in Inverness, I have a friend in Inverness, and we were there. We stayed there, and so I'm curious what your vision is to what is it going to take to return to the old ways, and actually materialize modeling after your partner's family, how that's going to come about.
Yeah, I think it has to start with family. It has to start with rebuilding that bond again. And I'm talking about between men and women. But I think that women have a lot of healing to do. Men got their own stuff to do. They need to sort that out.
Yes.
But women really have to sort a lot of stuff out. And those conversations are starting, you know, and in Scotland, I'm sure it was that new decision that, you know, a woman is a biological female, and it's ridiculous we had to even get to that point. But that's going to be, I think that's going to be challenged. I think we're going to have a lot of conversations going back and forth over the next while about these things. I don't think anything's resolved yet. So I think we need to get back to starting to rebuild our family structures and working through the past pain of our families. I think since the 1960s, probably, things have just been I don't know, I want to say like a hands came in and been messing around with things and destroying certain structures that were always there, until we can all get to a point where we can start to rebuild that. Then yeah, and I think out with the family, I think it's important to look to a place that has a sense of community, and I don't mean being in some, you know, kind of cult-like community. I don't mean that at all.
Exactly.
I don't mean
There's
that.
a caveat there. No cults.
But we moved to the countryside. So you mentioned Inverness. Inverness is still a city, even though it's tiny.
Yeah.
But we're even further out than that. We live where the dolphins are. But when I moved here, so it was 2050, I knew something was coming. I knew something big was coming, and it was a strategic move. So for me, at that time, I wanted somewhere that had a sense of community. So that they would watch out for kids when they're growing up. Anything happened to food security, we've got the means to grow food and feed ourselves, and people who will watch out for each other. And we absolutely do have that. We're next to the sea, we can go fishing. This is how bad I am. I've thought about all these things. I know where my water source is and all these things. So yeah, that was really important for me. So finding that sense of community. As well, but yeah, we've got a lot of stuff to do, and I think my post on social media, and I was never a social media person before. Like, yeah, I just appeared like a year ago. I didn't really bother with. I stayed away from it. I didn't want any part in it, but as I said, I'd kind of developed that relationship with Saturn, and it was insisted upon me that I must share. And I was like, I don't really want to, but you have to, and I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you are.
And I was pushed into that. And I think it's a big part of me is about. I think we need to find the middle way, which sounds really silly, but I feel as if we're just going to extremes, and it's like I think we all need to work together on this.
I agree. I so agree with that, you know. And your Substack posts are very, very, very compelling. What inspired you to start the Substack?
Probably being dyslexic. I know I keep going back to that, but it is a huge thing for me. So pushing myself to do things I don't want to do. So I don't want to write. You're going to write stuff.
You're an amazing writer. You are an amazing writer. You have a very detailed perspective that really invites your reader, I think, at least from my experience, to like really contemplate some things that you might think you already have thought about, but then all of a sudden, you know, there's like a new spark that happens.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool because I have a lot of subscriptions on Substack, and most of them I don't want to read them. I don't want to read them. You know, it's like I'm not drawn, but I'm drawn to your perspective. So are you outlining things, or is it more sort of I'm curious about your process.
What process?
Are you outlining, or are you just going with the flow?
I think I've always been the devil's advocate. So I will always, and I don't mean it in a nasty way, but if someone, even if I agree with the person, if they come at me with a certain opinion, I'll be like, but what about this? And it's not, and I do it in a very nice way. I'm not the kind of person that just tries to get people's backs up for the sake of it. It'd be so easy to do that, but I don't do that. It's more I want to have a conversation about it. So like, what about this? And then, you know, just to expand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think when I read a lot of other astrologer stuff. I've met some really great astrologers. They really are. They've been really good. But I find there's those kind of old hippie type astrologers, and I think a lot of younger people have learned from them, where they're quite idealistic, and you know, everything's going to be a utopia. So in their minds, everything's leading towards a utopia. Whereas in my mind, I'm looking at society and I'm going, what is wrong with this place? And then so my
Indeed,
interpretations
indeed.
are
I'm
coming
with
from
you.
that place.
Yeah, yeah.
So it definitely is coming from that observing and reality as it is, instead of reality as I would like it to be. That's where I'm kind of
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
from.
So are you teaching classes? What is the nature of your work? Let's talk about that because, you know,
Nature of my
I
work.
wanna really really highlight
Uh-huh.
you, your perspective, and
Sure.
I
I'm
mean,
not
I'm
even sure
learning
what
so
it is
much
yet.
already.
So I'm still waiting to find out why I'm here. So I don't do this for financial gain. I've got a job, pays me well. I enjoy what I do. I'm not looking for a change in career or anything. When I first started a year ago, I was like, well, I need to advertise myself as an astrologer and get astrology clients because that's what I should do. And then I realised that doing kind of readings for people and doing natal charts isn't where my it's not that it's not where my strength is, but it's not where my heart is. So I think what I want to do is to show people how to use astrology to benefit their own lives. And I think for me, to be able to guide people using the Substack posts is where I want to go with that. I mean, I would love to maybe mentor people and not like teach them astrology necessarily, but teach them how to read their own chart and teach them how to benefit from
Oh,
that.
cool.
I think that would when I was learning, I think that's what I would have looked for. And I've never really seen anyone doing that, but I would love to just, really in depth with someone's chart and pull it all apart.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
probably where I'd
because
like to go.
that's very and it's a very laser focused
Yeah,
way, I think, to learn it,
yeah,
it to just utilizing, your own chart in
uh-huh.
getting to know you in a different way, you know.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I have Jupiter and Scorpio in the ninth house. So ninth house is like higher learning. Jupiter's again about learning and about the big picture. But then you've got Scorpio, and Scorpio goes in deep and goes into the nitty gritty. So I kind of look at the big things and then I really hone in on the little things as well. So it is a strength of mine.
Beautiful, beautiful. Do you have a schedule in terms of your posts? I had a question about how you time it, or is it more sort of kind of free flow whenever you feel inspired?
No. When I started off the Substack, I kind of played around a wee bit. So at first I wasn't really posting regular, it was just when I felt like it. And then I even tried to do daily at one point. It just really wasn't hitting. Then I tried weekly and I'm like, it's a bit too much for me. People aren't really connecting. And then I found every fortnight seemed to work really well on Substack.
Okay.
And I put things out once a fortnight at 8:45 in the morning on a Sunday. So that's during Mercury's hour
Yeah.
on a Sunday. And so, yeah, so I've been doing that and that has been going really well. It seems to work well with Substack. It gives people a lot of time to kind of to find my work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to absorb, I think, because your content it's so rich and thought provoking, that to be able to like read through it and absorb it and, for me, the contemplation process, I mean, I'm just, I have to set a timer sometimes because otherwise I will like contemplate into oblivion and
Yeah.
kind of forget what I'm supposed to be doing.
I know. I remember when my kids were younger, I'd be like, I'm going to miss picking them up from school just because I get so absorbed in things. It's the hyper focus that comes when you've been neurodiverse, and it's like, you're just
Yes.
going to forget everything else.
Yes, yes, indeed. So I'm looking at the time. We've got about 10 minutes left. So I made a post uh recently on the Facebook about the separating the bitch fight between two women in my neighborhood who I thought would get along because
Uh-huh.
they're both astrologers. One is a sidereal astrology, the other one is a Western. And so, and of course, using me, they both took it upon themselves, and they're not my, you know, I'm
Yeah.
not their client, but they both for, I guess, to have conversation because we met at a local place to have supper. It took my information, and of course, ninth house in Western, ninth house sun in Libra in
Mhm.
Western astrology, and 11th house sun also in
Mhm.
Libra in sidereal astrology. So I couldn't believe how it exploded in my face. And I was literally just, and they got there early. I was a little late, so they had been drinking. And I
Mhm.
was like this, like, oh my God. Like I thought they were going to hit each other.
Yeah.
And the sort of like I'd never heard of such a thing. And so your response was the sort of astrology drama. So I guess there is a controversy between Western and sidereal. And so tell me more about that because I had no idea.
Yeah.
I was
So
stunned.
when I read your post, what I heard was it was two people fighting over what you should think without asking you what you thought. That
Yeah,
was what I got.
yeah,
So they're telling you how your life is, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And I'd shared a couple of experiences I had. So a couple of one astrologer told me I was a lawyer, and this was face to face. That this wasn't like a written report. One told me I was a lawyer, and I'm like, but I'm not though. And someone else told me I was a feminist, and I'm like, but I'm not. And they kind of put these labels on you, and you're like, but that's not who I am. And I think that we're all at different points in our lives. You know, your chart's going to interact with you in a very different way when you're 12 years old compared to when you're 60. It's just the way things are. And I think people forget to take the person into consideration. And what I'd mentioned to you is astrology is all about patterns and about pattern recognition.
indeed.
That's what it is, but it draws in different types of people. So you'll get the types of people who I would say they see in colour. So they bring in the mythologies and they bring in all this, you know, all these kind of things. And then you get the black and white people who are very analytical and data driven because
Yes,
they're looking for patterns.
yes.
But what those people maybe miss is that interpersonal skills that come through training in counselling or therapy. Not that they're not without their faults, but
Yes.
they miss that side of things. So they yeah, and it's just it's about knowing that is what astrology is good for. It helps you learn what your strengths and your weaknesses are,
Yes.
and yet there's nothing wrong with being very data driven because the best researchers can be very data driven. But if you dismiss the person, then what's the point? The
Yeah,
person should
it's
be the
like
center of
I should
freedom.
just leave. I should just leave.
Yeah.
And I was trying to make peace with them, you know, like, well, I take it all in. I even
Uh-huh.
brought in the shamanic astrology perspective
Uh-huh.
from my teacher Daniel Giamario. I tried to put that in. Oh, they totally dismissed him, which was really
Yeah.
funny. So they were in
Yeah.
agreement with that,
Uh-huh.
and then I had to put in that Ruthism about not knowing shit about. So it's like it was the only way for me because I was very disturbed by the exchange. I
Mhm.
don't like that kind of conflict
Yeah.
and
Especially about
added the
you.
alcohol to it. I mean, they
Yeah.
were heated and
Yeah.
yeah, it was very, very disappointing. And I haven't heard from either of them since.
Oh dear. It's a bigger, wider problem within astrology. So, yeah, there is this clash between sidereal and Western, absolutely. But even within sidereal and in Western, they all fight amongst each other, and no one seems to, they'll agree on some things, but other things that no, we can't agree on that. Um, and I mean, I didn't really recognize it until I was on Facebook and I connected with quite a lot of astrologers, and they do attack each other. And you know, I did write a post about this, and you know that the response I got was, well, it was all astrologers. There was loads of people kind of getting involved in the conversation, and it does seem to be a profession wide problem, and the attacks on each other. And what it reminded me of, I used to have a weight loss business. Before that was before all the drama, and that was the business I gave up, but it was really successful. But it was dog eat dog. It was women against women. It was,
Yes.
backstabbing, and it was, talking, it was just dragging other people's reputations through the mud. And
Yeah,
I was like,
it's
I
just
don't want to be part of this.
astounding. Like,
Yeah.
I could not believe it. And it was funny because we were sitting at the bar and the bartender goes, "This is a full-on bitch fight over astrology."
Mm-hmm.
And we were all in disbelief because it was so heated. And then the sort of exchange, it was vicious.
Yeah.
That's the word. It was vicious and very, very disturbing. So, and I had no idea. I mean, I know of the sort of personality sort of clashes, what
Mm-hmm.
regardless of profession or what avenue or what discipline, and the sort of smear tactics that happen. And it's just
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah, you talk about we women have a lot to work on
Mm-hmm.
because that kind of smear tactic and the one-upsmanship, the disrespect, no one needs that. Um, and so, I really appreciated your comment because it really struck a note with me to just kind of pull back and just kind of see the big picture
Mm-hmm.
of the sort of conflict that's happening in modern society, and particular being online a lot, the
Mm-hmm.
conflicts between personalities. And I mostly see it between women. I don't see it so much with men. Men are
Yeah.
a little bit more straightforward in their butchery of each other, whereas women are just a little bit more, they're a little bit more shady, a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
underhanded, and like, whoa, okay. Yeah, yeah, I'm kind of like this. Okay, just, yeah, just keep it away from me,
Yeah.
so observing. So I really appreciate your perspective on the masculine feminine aspects of Saturn,
Mm-hmm.
because I
Mm-hmm.
think ultimately any conflict is going to reflect on on Saturn, and that the sort of systems in our minds and also in our hearts that we cling to and perhaps aren't even ours, you
Yeah.
know, perhaps it just we've assimilated or taken things on, as maybe a trauma response or
Mm-hmm.
as some kind of automated thing or some kind of indoctrinated system. So yeah, thank you for I like it. So the masculine, Aquarius, feminine, Capricorn.
Yeah, and we can look at that for all of them. So, like, Mars has a feminine, masculine side, and this is where the traditional rulers become so important. Because if
Hmm.
we're using the modern rulers, we lose all of that beauty and that pattern.
Okay.
So it's really important to do that. So for Mars, it would be Scorpio's the feminine side, and Aries is the masculine side.
Wow. Yeah, love it. Love it, love it, love it. Well, I'm looking at our time. I want to be respectful because I know
Mm-hmm.
it's the end of your day. Do you have any final comments or thoughts before we close?
No, just thank you so much for having me, and it's been really wonderful. It's been great. Just like we were just having a chat. It's good.
You're so welcome. And we will have all of your information in the show notes below. So Caroline, thank you so much for your time. I've really,
Yeah.
really enjoyed our conversation. I enjoy your company and energy. And yeah, blessings to you. Thank you for your work. All
Thank
right, my
you.
loves, that is it for this segment. And so until next time, here is to love, truth, and beauty. Mwah. Bye for now, loves. Bye bye.